All right, I think we might be about ready to jump in here, folks. Everybody, welcome. Welcome to today's class. This is part of our Plano Public Library's Excel series. We're so glad you're joining us today. Our content today is all about formulas and functions. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get going with formulas and functions. So our objectives today, we're going to take a beginning look at how to use formulas and functions for mathematical calculations in Excel. We're also going to talk a little bit about creating charts and graphics using the data. We won't go too much into that because that's part of our series and the next class. So if you didn't already know, you can make mathematical relationships between lots of data numbers using formulas with the Excel program. Formulas are used for things like simple addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, or even much more complex calculations. Let's get started with a few basics. So if you are following along on the practice sheet, go ahead and make sure that you have the first tab open that says Basics on the bottom. Right down here, you should be on a tab that says Basics. Yours won't say Welcome or Closing, that's just on mine. All right, so let's go over a little bit of basic information about Excel so we're all on the same page. The first thing is to know that a formula in Excel performs a calculation or some other action with the data that you've put into a worksheet. Now, functions are basically formulas. However, they are built in, or you might say preset formulas that come within your Excel program. These functions are sort of like shortcuts. They're coded commands for common calculations that are often asked to be done in Excel. So let's cover a few more basics, starting with cells. Every cell or rectangle in Excel has its own name or reference. So for example, you can see right now, I'm clicked in cell A1. There's also a handy box up here called the cell reference or cell name box. Anytime you want, you could type in it, hit enter, and it'll take you to the cell that you've named. So cells are very important, and the cell references are how we're going to create our data and perform our calculations. All right, and another thing to notice is this area right here. This is called the formula bar. As we work, we'll be referring to this spot quite often. All right, let's talk about formulas. A formula or a function is always going to begin with an equal sign. So let's click here if you're following along on cell A4. You could also type it in the name box if you want. But A4 is where we're going to put our formula. And just for fun, I'm going to go up into the formula bar, click in it, and type the equal sign. And now I'm going to type a simple formula, A1 plus A2 plus A3. So you can see I'm just quite simply adding up A1, 2, and 3. Then I'll hit enter, and voila, something happened. If we click back in the cell A4, where we put that formula, we can see it shows up again in that formula bar. But we don't really have any data in our sheet yet, right? So not a whole lot happened. Let's add some data and see what changes. So if I clicked in cell A1 and put in the value 1, look, things start happening. In A2, let's put in another 1. And in A3, a final 1. And once we return to the final, to cell A4 where we have our formula, you can see it has performed the calculation of the data in A1 plus A2 plus A3, which equals 3, 1 plus 1 plus 1. All right, so that was just a quick visual on how to put in a formula. We're going to practice this a lot more, so don't worry if you missed any of that. Now, just for another example, let's talk about a function. A function will also start with an equal sign. So right now I'm clicked in cell B4, where I'm going to start a function. It starts with an equal sign, just like our formula did. And these functions are going to start with some pre-programmed commands. We'll talk about those a little bit more, but for now I'm just going to type it in. And let's say I know I'm going to use the command sum for getting the sum of some data. Then after the command, we need a parentheses. So the data or the cell references are always going to go in parentheses with the function. So let's say we want to deal with A1 again. I'll type in A1. Now, here's a little difference with functions or dealing with more data, which we'll cover more again in a minute, is a comma. So instead of the plus sign, this time if I add a comma, that's telling me or telling Excel which cells to include. So if I put in commas and also A2 and A3, now I'm using the function to get the sum of the data in cells A1, A2, and A3. So if we hit enter, you can see it performed that calculation. So basically what we're saying here is this formula of A1 plus A2 plus A3 is exactly the same thing as saying, let's find the sum of A1, comma A2, comma A3. You'll see there's lots of different ways to get to the same information. All right. So we've looked at a formula and using addition, and then we've looked at a function, still getting the sum of some values. Let's look one more way with a slightly different approach. And the difference here is going to be the use of a colon. When you use a colon in between cell names, Excel knows to include those cells and everything between them. So think of the colon as standing for through. So in this example, let's click in cell C4 if you're practicing along. And this time, we'll use the same function setup, equals sum. We still need that parentheses, but this time I'm going to tell it the cell A1 colon A3. So in essence, I asked for Excel to find the sum of all the data in cells A1 through A3. So if we hit enter, it's going to perform that calculation. So basically just going over some terminology here and showing you right off the bat, there are lots of different paths to get to the same answer in Excel. All right. So let's go over a few of the common preset functions that are in Excel. You've already seen sum. That's going to add up a list of numbers. Average is often used. That's going to, of course, calculate an average from a list of values. The max function will find the largest value in a list. The count function will count out how many number items are in your list, which seems kind of strange with something this small, but imagine if you had a spreadsheet with tons and tons of lines of data. That could be useful. Min stands for minimum, and that's going to find the lowest value in a list. And round will let you round up to a specific number of digits. So don't worry if you missed any of those. We're going to go over them and practice them all. But I did want to cover some of the basics. So we're going to go ahead and quickly pause to see if anyone wants to catch up or if there are any questions about some of these basic features. Jamie, if we have any questions about the basics so far, feel free to jump in.
So far, it looks like we are all on track. Oh, I just got a question that came in. If there is a cheat sheet document that provides a list of common functions.
That I would say is pretty easy to search on the web. So I would just jump into your preferred browser and search for, I think you called it list of common functions in Excel. And as we go through, you'll see there's also other spots where you can kind of get a list. So like right here where I'm clicking on the autosum dropdown, it will get you to some of the functions and even more. And we'll see that as we go on. Anything else, Jamie?
Not right now. I'm going to go ahead and drop a link in the chat for Microsoft's list of Excel functions that might be helpful for reference later.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, then I think we will proceed, everybody. So we've talked about some of the basics. What's a formula? What's a function? Those features like starting with an equal sign, what a comma does, and what a colon means data through. Let's move on to practicing some of these formulas and functions. So if you're following along on the practice sheet, now's the time to go ahead and click on the tab that says personal budget. So if you're working along hands-on, click on personal budget tab. If not, you can always access this later and practice it at your own pace. No problem. So here we've got some data already preset so that we can practice with a pretty common use for Excel, which is creating a budget. First, we start by clicking on a cell where we want to enter a formula or basically get an answer. In this case, we're going to click on B7 right here. Again, you can always type in the name box as well. So we're clicked in B7 and we want to put in a formula here. So when we're clicked in B7, we can go up to the formula bar. And this one we're just going to type out like we did with the first example. We know we're going to start with an equal sign, and let's just use addition operations. And in this case, we want to add the data in B4 to the data in B5. So I've just said equals B4 plus B5. I'm going to hit enter and let's see what happens. We got the answer 5,800 because Excel added 4,400 to 1,400 right there, which was the data in the cells we specified. Okay, so there we go. We wrote a formula and got a little information. All right, let's move on. And just another reminder, if you get clicked away somewhere else, you can always click back in the cell where your answer is to find your formula up in the formula bar. Okay, now obviously sometimes you need to edit or change a formula to include other data that you want to add. Let's say we want to do that. So if we're clicked in B7 right here, we could go back up to our formula bar and make some changes. Let's say in this instance, I want to also add the data in cell B6. So now our formula reads equals B4 plus B5 plus B6. If we hit enter now, you can see our answer has changed to 6,300 because it's now adding all the data in the cells above it. All right, so it's that easy to make a quick change. I'm going to now show you an awesome tool that if you don't already know, you're going to love. There's a tool called autofill. We're going to autofill this formula across the row and see what Excel magically does. So the way to autofill is to select the cell with the formula that you want to copy and hover over the bottom right corner until you get this dark plus sign. I'll do that again in case you missed it. So we want to hover over the bottom right corner so that our plus sign is black and bold. All right. And then we click, one left click and hold down while we drag across our row. When you've got it all the way to the cell where you want to end, you release and look at the magic. So what autofill has done is applied the exact same formulas to the following cells, but automatically adjusted the cell names for us. So here we've got the same formula, but referring to column C. And then here we've got the same formula, but referring to column D. And the same for here, it's referring to all the data in column E. So if you've got repeated formulas like this, autofill is an awesome time saver for sure. All right. So as we discussed a minute ago, there are lots of great built-in functions to save us some time in Excel as well. Let's practice some functions now. First, as always, you select the cell where you want to have an answer. In this case, we want an answer in cell B15. That's column B, row 15, or you can always type it in the name box right there. So we're here in cell B15. One path to doing this is this button right here, the Insert Function button. It looks like an F with a little X, Insert Function. So if I click on Insert Function, it brings up a dialog box. This helps me select from common functions right here. If you don't know what you want exactly, you could always change the options here to different categories, or you can even try and describe what you're trying to do and have it help determine what you want. But in this case, we just want to simply get the sum of some numbers again. So once I have it on sum, I'm going to click OK. And now here it's going to help me build this function because it's asking for which cells we want to consider. And it even tried to predict what I might want. Here it says it's offering the suggestion of getting the sum of B10 through B14, which happens to exactly be the cells I want to do. So if it guessed correctly, great, you're in good shape. All you have to do is click on OK. All right, so once I clicked OK, you can see here the resulting calculation, 3014, because it added up all the data in these cells above it. That if we click on B15 again, you can see our function right here. It took the sum of cells B10 through B14, exactly what we wanted to do. Now, I'm sure you can guess what we might do now, which is autofill that one more time. So remember, we find the formula or function we want to copy, hover on the bottom right corner of that cell till we get the dark plus. Click once, left click once and hold and drag. Release when you're at the end of your cell that you want to copy to, and voila. Again, it has filled that formula to the rest of the row and accounted for different column number or letters in this case. All right. So that's one way to insert your functions. Let's see here. As with many things in Excel, there are lots of ways to do the same thing. So I'm going to undo that real quick and undo again and select back into cell B15. So we're just doing this another way. If you want to follow along, you're welcome to, or you could just watch. So this time, once I'm clicked in cell B15, which is where I want an answer, I'm going to go up to the ribbon and find the autosum button right up here. Autosum. Okay, so I could just click on it, or you can click the drop down and see other options. In this case, I do want to take the sum again, so I'm going to click on sum. This may be a version you're familiar with where Excel highlights the cells on the spreadsheet itself that it thinks you want to calculate. It's trying to predict what I want to do. Often it predicts correctly, which is great. That's a big time saver. If it didn't, all I have to do is grab one of the edges of the cells and drag to adjust. All right, but in this case, I do want cells B10 through B14. So once those are highlighted, all I have to do is hit enter. All right, so that's just another way to get to the same answer, but this time we use the autosum button up in the top right of the ribbon. Now I'm going to once again autofill to the rest of the row. So I'll click on the formula I want to copy or function, left click and drag with that dark plus, release when I've got it at the end. Okay, so here we've done a little more practice with putting in formulas and functions mainly in a few different ways. I'm going to pause again and see if Jamie wants to jump in with any questions.
Looks like we are right on track.
Perfect. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, everybody. All right. So we've looked at a lot of different ways to add. So I'd say we've got adding covered. Now let's go through some of the other functions. To do so, we're going to click over, if you're following along in the practice sheet, to the tab called Grades. So here we are on the Grades tab. I'm going to make that a little bit bigger so maybe you can see a little better. We're on Grades, and we're going to practice doing different things with data. We're going to start with just reviewing how to add or get a sum. We'll try and do this a few different ways so you get some practice. So if we click in cell B9 right here, we also know we're in the right place if the name box says B9. And we're going to get a sum. I'm just going to go ahead and type in the function since I know it offhand. Equals sum parentheses. And we're going to take the sum of B3 data all the way through, so colon, B7 data. Then we'll close that parentheses. And if you noticed, Excel also did some highlighting in blue on the sheet itself. So I've got my function typed in, so I'm going to hit enter and see what I got. Simply an addition total of the numbers up here, 441.6. Okay, I think we've got adding pretty well covered, so let's go to the next box down. This is cell B10, and now let's try an average. So this time, how about we use the autosum button? So if I come up here, again, I'm in B10, cell B10. If I come up here to the autosum button and ask for an average, it tries to predict what information I want to average, but it didn't quite get it right, did it? That will be a very boring average. So I'm this time going to just type into the formula bar that I actually want the average of the data in cells B3 and colon, meaning through B7. So that same data, now I want an average. So I'm going to hit enter. And here it's given me a very strange looking average. Let's see if we might need to format a cell for that. I'm going to click Format, Format Cells. And look at that, it was set for a date, which not exactly helpful in this category. Maybe we click on something like number. And here I can also control how many decimal places that we get our average rounded to. So let's say we want 2 decimal places, and we'll click OK. And now we got something much more looking like an average. Average of the data up here resulted in 88.32. Okay, let's go practice some other functions. This time we're going to find a max. And remember, a max is the maximum value in a list of numbers. So we're selected B11. Cell B11 is where we want our answer. And let's see, let's try it this way this time. The insert function button right up here. So we get that dialog box. And there's max. It also gives you a nice description of what the function's going to do once you select one. Sometimes that's helpful. So we're going to get the max here. I'm going to click OK. And it's going to try and predict what cells we want to use. Here it only predicted cell B10, which was not super helpful, not correct. So we're going to have to fix it. We want the max of our data in cells B3 through B7. All right, so I've got that typed in, the correct data or the cell references. I'll click OK. And now it found our highest value. Again, in a short list like this, that's kind of anticlimactic, but imagine if you had a much bigger sheet of data and you needed to find a highest value quickly. That's a great way to do it. Okay, so conversely, let's get the lowest value or the minimum. This is going to find the smallest value in our list of numbers. All right, so this time let's type this one in. We want equal sign min, and we need parentheses, and we're still dealing with the same data set, which is B3 colon or through B7. We'll close those parentheses, hit enter, and see what we got. This time we got 75.6 as our lowest value. Sure enough, just a glance and we know that's correct. Okay, let's look at the count function. This one is going to tell us how many values or numbers there are in our list. So right now we're selected in cell B13. Let's go back up to our autosum button here on the ribbon and look at that, count numbers. We'll click on count numbers. It will add its best guess as to which cells we want to count. But again, that's not quite correct. If I wanted to, I could use the highlighted cells to correct its prediction. So that's what I did this time. I simply used my mouse to highlight cells B3 through B7. And you can see in the formula bar, it adjusted. I'll hit enter. And it is now telling us we have 5 numbers in our list. All right, we've got one more to practice here. Someone's already calculated a GPA for us, but we're going to practice rounding. So if you're selected in cell B16, we're ready to add a formula. Let's see, how about this time we do the insert function again and see if round comes up easily. Not quite there. So let's type in round and see what it can find. It found the function for rounding. So we're going to click OK. And looks like it didn't even try to predict what we want to round. Fair enough, Excel, fair enough. So let's type in the cell or the data we want to round, which is simply that GPA that's in cell B15. Now this one is a little different. We have to tell it the number of digits we want it to round to. Do we want 2 digits after the decimal point? How do we want to round? So in this case, I just want to round to 1 digit after the decimal. I'm going to type in 1 in that number of digit spot. You can see by the formula bar up here, it has adjusted to say equals round the cell B15 data. And this time, because it's a round command, it's just using the comma to separate it from the number of decimal points that we specified. So we'll click OK. And here it has given us the rounding of 3.4 for the GPA. All right, that was a great lot of practice. So here's a great spot for us to pause and see if there are any questions so far about all the functions we just tried out.
I just want to take a minute to reiterate a couple of the functions that we used. So we just want to verify that with our total grade, we were using our sum function and how we got there.
Correct. So that's just adding everything from B3, B4, B5, B6 plus B7. That's what sum gave us.
And then we had a request just to go over the average and the round functions again.
You bet.
They work.
Thanks. So let's start that one from scratch. So let's do the average again first. If I select cell B10, because I know that's where I want to have my average answer, I'd say let's go up to autosum for that example and choose the function average. And you'll see in the formula bar, it starts to build that formula for us. Now, I don't want the average of cell B9. That won't do me much good. So I do have to adjust what I want the average of. And I want the average of our data up from the top, which is cells B3 through B7. And you can see it's highlighted that section of data in blue. That's exactly the numbers I want to take and have an average of. So I'm going to click enter. If you wanted to change the decimal points here, how many decimal points, you absolutely can. You just might go over to format cells like we did before, format cells, and specify the decimal places. Perhaps I only want 1 decimal point. There we go, or one numeral after the decimal point. All right, so hopefully that helped with average, going over that one more time. Now it was rounding was the other one, I believe. So let's look at that. I'm going to clear out that formula and we'll start from scratch. So from rounding, we just want to round up this GPA because that's a lot of decimal points for a GPA. Nobody really talks about a GPA in that way. So I'm clicked in the cell we need, our answer, which is cell B16. In this example, I'll just use the insert function button. I'll click on that and it pops open that dialog box. This time it remembered that I wanted the round function handy. So since it's already set to round, I can click OK. Now I have to tell it what cell I want to round. And in this case, I want to round the data in cell B15. So I'm going to type in the cell number. And you can see right out here, it's already pulled in my data, just kind of as a preview. All right, and now it wants me to tell it how many digits after the decimal point I want it to round to. Well, I would say I only want it to round up to 1. So you can see here, it's already pulling in that operation as a preview. Okay, so I wanted to take the average of the data in cell B15, and I only want one number after the decimal. Everything looks good, so I'll click OK. And we got our GPA of 3.4. All right, any other questions on this sheet?
I think we are in good shape.
Awesome, thank you, Jamie. Then let's move ahead a bit. So we've talked over some basics of Excel formulas and functions. We've done some practice making a personal budget and doing some different ways to add up or different ways to put in functions to add up some budget items. We practiced a whole bunch of different functions here in our grades tab. Now let's talk about a really great feature of Excel, which is charts. So if you're following along hands-on on the practice sheet, go ahead and click on the tab labeled chart. It'll look like this. Let me blow that up a little bit too so that you can see a little better, although I don't want to go too crazy because we are going to end up using some of the other space here. All right, so we're just going to talk very basically about how Excel has charts to let you present your data in a visual format through quite a variety of charts or graph types. Excel gives various types of charts that you can choose from to display your data in lots of different ways. But of course, before you can make a chart, you need to have some data in the worksheet. You can see on our chart tab, we already have some data, as well as some labels, which are going to be very important in this process. So these titles are important because it will help Excel label your chart as you create it, or create a legend, if you will. So since our data is already provided, let's get started trying out a chart. There are lots of ways to do this, of course. There's always multiple paths to the same end here in Excel. Let's start by highlighting our data. We're going to select or highlight everything in cell A2 through A7. I did that with Shift and click, but you can use whatever variety or method you like for that. All right. Now, once I've done that, you can see a small icon appears at the bottom right. This is called the Quick Analysis Tool. You can see if you're a keyboard shortcut person, this is Control Q. All righty. So we're going to click on that and see it comes up with several different categories, including charts. I'm going to click on charts and you'll see it gives us a few different options right off the bat. Let's say we just choose this one and it gives us a quick preview called clustered column. If I click on that, it's going to insert the chart right here in our worksheet. Okay, so that was using the quick analysis tool. Let me show you another way. I'm just going to undo that. All right, up on our ribbon, under the Insert tab, once you've clicked Insert up on your ribbon, we see that there are chart options right in through here. So you can pick the one that looks good to you. Maybe we'll try a pie chart this time. So if I click on this, I've got some more options. I'm just gonna choose a simple 2D pie chart. And voila, it inserts this chart into our worksheet. All right, so that was using the Insert tab and charts. You can see it pulls in those titles, so it's important to label your data. All right, let me show you another way to do this. In this method, we would select our data again. So A2 through C7. Yep. And then there is the shortcut of F11. So if I click F11, it goes right to some charting styles. And let's say I want to go with this one that it suggested right there. And we've got it opened as a new tab. So if you didn't want to lay it right into your worksheet where you had your data, here it has given you a new tab with just your chart. So I'll click back on the chart and you can see that was our data tab. And now it has put in a chart tab. You can always rename that by right-clicking and choosing rename. And let's say I'll call this column chart, so that I know the difference between my tabs. Okay, so that F11 just throws in whatever chart you selected as a new tab. Okay, so of course you can do a lot of different things with your tabs. I'm going to do quick analysis tool, or your charts, I should say, quick analysis tool, and put in that column chart again. And you'll see you have lots of different tools up here. Hopefully you can see it. I'm not sure if my screen will let you see that very well. Let me pull that down a little so I can see past my Zoom tools. All right, so we've got things like, there we go, chart tools. Here's our design tab where you can change the style of chart to whatever you wish. All right. You can swap out rows and columns right here. You could select different data. You can move your chart. All kinds of different things you can do on the design tab. And now let's quickly look at the format tab. Here's where we can make things look a little different. Changing font styles. Things like that. Changing some colors. Here's where you can choose different color themes. It's nice to have a little preview every time you hover over things. You can, let's see what else we can do here. If you click on your chart itself, you can start working with the text. And let's call this serial chart. You can also click down here and edit your text. All kinds of great stuff. I don't want to get too much into this further because this is a lot of what we're going to cover is all the different charts and ways you can manipulate them on next week's class. Okay. But one more thing I do want to show you about charts is what you can do with them. So let's say you've created these great charts in Excel and you want to add them to maybe a Word document or maybe a PowerPoint presentation. There are two different options for putting in your chart. You could put in a static copy of your chart, which is basically just an image or kind of a snapshot of what your data and your chart looks like right now. Or you could insert a linked copy of your chart, which will change as your source data changes. Okay, so in other words, if you update your data in your Excel, your source Excel file, wherever you put your link chart will update as well. So let's give this a try. First, we'll do just the static version. So how do we do that? Well, we click on our chart to select it. We come up to the Home tab and see that there's the Copy button. So I'm going to click Copy. And let's say I want to put this in a Microsoft Word file. So I'm going to come here to my Word file that I had open and blank. I can come back open to the home, back up to the Home tab, and this time just click Paste, and voila. There is my static copy of the chart. I can probably do things like resize and maybe make it look a bit different, but when I do that with this static chart, it's only going to change it here in Word. In other words, this is not tied to my data back in Excel at the moment. All right, it's more just an image or a snapshot. Let's try the other way. I'm going to delete this chart and go back to Excel. Let me go ahead and make this a little bit bigger for you. Resize a little. Okay, so once again, I'm going to select my chart. This time I'm going to come up here to Home and I'm going to copy. But the difference is what I do when I paste it. So here I am in my Word document. When I come up to Home and find the paste, I'm going to look for the drop-down arrow under the paste clipboard. And what I want is the paste special options. You could also work with these up here if you'd like. So if we hover over each, it's going to give us some different options. So what we're looking for is link data. Okay. And you've got two options for link data. Here you can use destination theme. In other words, whatever Microsoft Word thinks it should look like, but keeping that linked data. Or here, the next one over says keep the source formatting. So the way we made it in Excel, the way we made it look in Excel, and link the data. So I'm going to do that one, keep the source formatting and linked data. And here it is. It looks the same as before, but there's a little difference. Let's say we go back to our data and realize, oops, we miscalculated and we need to adjust our data. So it turns out that actually 10 adults liked Kix cereal. So I'm going to go ahead into adults and Kix and change that 5 to 10. You can see right away in that chart, it raised Kix from 5 to 10. Let's go out to Word and see if it did the same thing. Sure enough, right here, Kix for adults went up from 5 to 10 because this data is still linked to our Excel sheet. So if I undid that and put it back to 5, you see our chart here updated, as well as our linked chart here in Word updated back to 5. Make sense? Pretty cool and pretty handy. All right. So again, I don't want to get too much more into charts for you because this is territory they're going to cover in detail, as well as many other great visual tools next week. You don't want to miss it. It'll be the same time, Wednesday at 1 o'clock, next week's class on charts and visualizations. Okay, Jamie, we're at this great spot where we have caught up on all our content. Time for any questions.
We did have a request, if you have a moment, to just show us again how you got the chart to open in its own tab.
Absolutely. So that magic thing was the F11 shortcut. So let me get rid of this chart. So that one was selecting the data we want for our chart. And then unfortunately, you don't see what I'm doing, but I am hitting F11. Let me see if there's another way to visualize that since you don't know what I'm doing here. Let me think. Yeah, it's also up in the Insert tab. And let me think here. Yeah, I may have to do some digging to see how they did it as a different tab there. But the quickest way is just to hit F11, and that's when it just pops to a different tab for you. Here it defaulted to labeling it as chart 2. Okay, so that was the F11 shortcut. Select your data and hit F11 for a new tabbed chart. Okay, Jamie?
All right, I think the rest of our questions will be handled in our future class on charts where we can go into more detail on that.
Perfect. Yes, everyone, we encourage you to continue this series, especially next week, where they're basically going to pick up where we're leaving off right here. So if there are further questions, we encourage you to go ahead and start putting those in the chat now as we wrap up. Let me put up our screen here. So just a reminder, the rest of this Excel series continues next week. That'll be Wednesday, again at 1 o'clock on the 23rd. And that class is called Charts, Tables, and Visualizations. You don't want to miss it, especially if you want to know more about what we just finished doing today. And then the final class in this Excel series will be the following Wednesday, December 30th. And that one will cover pivot tables, also a great one to take. That'll be just December 30th at 1 o'clock. So we're so glad you joined us today. We will hang out a few more minutes in case there are further questions. You can find out about these and all of our classes anytime at planolibrary.org or planolibrarylearns.org. We have lots going on for you virtually. And anytime you want to visit our website, planolibrary.org, there's also a ton of resources for further learning. We highly recommend the lynda.com resources. Those you have free access to with your Plano library card, which is in tremendous value. And starting next year, I believe they'll be called LinkedIn Learning, but it's still going to be the great lynda.com content where you can find all kinds of Excel topics on very specific things to do. They're usually taught in video format, so they're very user-friendly, easy to learn from. And of course, we have lots of books and even more information for you at the library about Excel. Again, we hope you'll join us next week to continue this series. If you've got another question, Jamie, we can take it now.
Let me take a look and see what we have. If you have a moment and are able to, someone did request if we could just show a walkthrough on how to get onto lynda.com so that they kind of know what that process looks like.
Sure, let me pull that up. So here you'd visit our library website, which is planolibrary.org. You would come to our Learn tab because that's what you want to do is learn more. Once you're in the Learn tab, scroll down and it's going to be within the Research and Learn category. I'll click on that. And then you'll find lots of learning tools grouped by category. So you can scroll down, whatever works for you, until you find lynda.com. Again, just a heads up, starting in January, I believe it may look more like LinkedIn Learning. But once I click that icon, or I could do the Access Now link, it's going to ask for my library card number. So just be sure you have that handy with you. And then that will get you logged in into all the amazing lynda.com learning tools. There are probably, I would guess, up to thousands of different Excel tutorials, really great, and all kinds of other topics. If there are other things you're trying to learn, it's probably in lynda.com. Did that cover it for you?
I think that will help.
All right, well, we'll hang around a little bit longer in case anyone has further questions. We encourage you to put those in the chat. We'll probably hang here till right at 2 o'clock and jump in with your questions. And we do really want to thank you so much for joining us today. I really hope it was helpful. Thank you to Jamie for our chat moderation and Nova for watching us on technology aspects. So feel free to log off when you're ready, and be sure and join us next week for those charts, tables, and visualizations. If you've got questions, throw them in the chat. We'll be here a few more minutes. Thanks, everybody.